In a quiet town in Ghana, two boys named Kwame and Ao grew up together like brothers. From the first day they met in school, something special connected them. Kwame was the one who always laughed loudly and talked too much, while Ao was calm and gentle. Where Kwame rushed ahead, Ao thought first. Where Ao hesitated, Kwame pushed him forward. Together they made a perfect balance. They spent their childhood running through dusty roads, climbing mango trees, and swimming in the river behind the school. When the sun went down, they would sit under the old baobab tree and talk about their dreams. Kwame wanted to become a great businessman in the city, while Ao dreamed of being a teacher. Every evening they promised each other that no matter where life took them, they would never forget their friendship. Their bond was not just built on laughter but on moments of kindness. When Kwame's mother fell sick, Ao helped him fetch water and cook food. When Ao's father lost his job, Kwame shared food from his home without being asked. The villagers often smiled when they saw them together. These two, they would say, their friendship is as strong as the roots of the baobab. As they grew older, their friendship remained the same, but life began to change around them. The small town was peaceful, but work was hard to find. Many young people left for the cities in search of better lives. Still, Kwame and Ao stayed close. They studied together, worked together, and supported each other. One day, as they walked home from the market, Kwame stopped and looked at Ao seriously. "My brother," he said, "do you ever think we'll leave this place? I want to see more of the world. I want to make money and build something big." Ao smiled. "You will, Kwame. You are the dreamer. I will stay here and teach. Someone has to help the children who remain." Kwame laughed. "Then you will teach my children one day," he said proudly, throwing his arm around Ao's shoulder. Years passed and the two friends became young men. Their lives started to move in different directions, but the bond remained. Every morning they met by the river to talk before going to work. Ao worked at a small community school, teaching children how to read and write. Kwame, meanwhile, was always looking for business opportunities, selling palm oil one month, trading yams the next. Even when Kwame failed at something, Ao never laughed. He would listen and encourage him. "Don't stop trying," Ao would say. "Your heart is too strong to give up." Kwame often told others, "Ao is my brother, not by blood but by bond." He trusted him more than anyone. But soon, change began to whisper through their peaceful lives. Kwame met a trader from Accra who told him about the city, tall buildings, fast cars, and endless chances to make money. The idea of city life took hold in Kwame's mind. He started dreaming of success, of wearing fine suits and living in a house with light that never went out. At night he would tell Ao about it. "My brother, we cannot stay in this small town forever. There's nothing here but dust. I want to see the world." Ao listened quietly. "Kwame," he said softly, "the city shines, but it is not always gold. Sometimes what looks bright from far can burn when you get close." Kwame laughed and shook his head. "You always worry too much, Ao. I will go there, make money, and come back to build something here. You'll see." Ao smiled, though he felt a strange sadness. He didn't want to lose his friend to the noise of the city, but he also didn't want to stop him from chasing his dream. On the day Kwame left for Accra, half the village came to the roadside to say goodbye. He carried a small bag, wearing his best shirt and shoes. Ao stood beside him, holding back tears. "Promise me you'll write," Ao said. Kwame grinned. "Of course. I'll write, I'll call, and when I come back I'll bring gifts for everyone, even you, teacher man." Ao laughed and hugged him. "Go well, my brother. May your path be straight and your hands be blessed." Kwame waved as the bus drove away, the dust rising behind it. He leaned out the window, shouting, "Don't forget me, Ao." But Ao just smiled sadly. "It is you who must not forget, Kwame," he whispered. The town felt quieter after Kwame left. Days turned into weeks, and Ao went about his routine, teaching children, visiting his parents, and walking by the river alone. Sometimes he would sit under the baobab tree where they used to talk and think about his friend in the faraway city. He wondered if Kwame still remembered their promises. At first, letters came, short ones filled with excitement. "Ao, the city is big. Lights everywhere, cars that move faster than goats can run. I found a job at a small company. It's not easy, but I will make it." Ao smiled whenever he read them. But soon the letters stopped coming. The silence stretched like a long shadow. Ao kept writing, but there were no replies. Still, he prayed for his friend every night. Meanwhile, in Accra, Kwame's life was moving fast. The city was exciting but harsh. Work was hard, people were busy, and money went quickly. But he was determined. He wanted to prove himself. He started making new friends, spending time with people who talked big and lived fast. They laughed when he spoke about his village friend. Old school friends don't matter here, one of them said. You need city people now. Kwame laughed too, though deep inside something felt wrong. He didn't notice that the more he tried to fit in, the more he lost a piece of himself. Still, every now and then he would remember Ao's calm face and wise words. He would whisper to himself, "I'll visit soon." But the visit never came. And yet, far away under the same night sky, Ao still looked up at the stars, whispering prayers for his friend. Prayers that someday Kwame would remember the promises they made under the baobab tree. Because even when time and distance tried to pull them apart, Ao's heart remained steady. He still believed that true friendship never dies. And though Kwame didn't know it, his friend's faith in him would soon become the very thing that saved his life. Years went by, and life slowly began to pull Kwame and Ao apart. What was once a friendship built on daily laughter and shared dreams started to fade under the weight of distance and time. Kwame had moved to Accra after getting a good job at a trading company. The city was loud, busy, and full of energy, everything the small town was not. Ao, meanwhile, stayed behind to take care of his aging parents. He worked as a teacher at the same community school, living a simple life, quiet and steady, just as he always had. At first, the two friends tried to stay in touch. Every Sunday, Kwame would call Ao and tell him stories about city life, the tall buildings, the endless traffic, the strange food, and the people who always seemed to be in a hurry. Ao would listen with a smile, imagining his friend in that world of light and sound. He was proud of him, proud that Kwame had found a path to success. Sometimes Ao would laugh and say, "One day you will forget us village people completely." And Kwame would reply quickly, "Never. You're my brother. I'll never forget where I came from." But promises are easy to make and hard to keep. As months turned into years, the calls began to slow. Kwame became busier with work, with new responsibilities, new faces, and new friends. The city had its own rhythm, fast and demanding, and soon his days were filled with meetings, deadlines, and late-night hangouts. He started to spend time with people who dressed well and spoke fast. They talked about money, cars, and business deals. None of them knew about the quiet town where Kwame came from or about Ao, the friend who had once shared every moment of his life. When Ao called, sometimes Kwame answered. But sometimes the phone rang and rang until it went silent. Maybe he's busy, Ao would tell himself. He never grew angry. He never complained. He just waited and tried again later. When even the call stopped being answered, he started sending short messages instead. Simple ones like, "How are you, brother? Hope you are eating well. May God guide you today." Sometimes Kwame replied, sometimes he didn't. But Ao kept sending them anyway. It was his quiet way of keeping the friendship alive. Back in Accra, Kwame often read the messages and smiled, though he rarely replied. "Ao never changes," he would say to himself. "Always checking on me." But then he would put the phone away and forget to answer. The city life had a way of swallowing time and attention. One evening, as Kwame sat in a restaurant with his new friends, laughter filled the room. Music played softly in the background, and the smell of grilled fish filled the air. He was wearing a fine shirt, one he had bought after his first big paycheck. As he scrolled through his phone, he saw Ao's latest message. "It's been a while, my brother. How are you really doing?" Kwame looked at it for a moment. He thought about replying, but then someone called his name and the moment passed. He slid his phone back into his pocket. Days later, Ao waited for a reply that never came. Still, he didn't stop sending his messages. Every few days he would write something short and hopeful. To him, friendship was not about how often they talked but about never giving up on someone you cared for. Ao's life in the village was simple. He woke early to sweep the compound, fetched water for his parents, and went to teach at the school. The children loved him, his calm voice, his gentle patience, and his warm smile. Sometimes, when the lessons ended, he would tell his students stories about friendship, using himself and Kwame as examples. "There was a boy I grew up with," he would say. "We did everything together. Life took him far away, but even when friends are apart, their hearts can still stay close." The children always listened quietly, though they didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, Kwame's life grew faster. He started earning more money, buying new clothes, and going to more events. He got promoted at work and began traveling to other cities. But with every success, something inside him began to change. The laughter that used to come so easily when he was with Ao now came only when he was with people who liked his money. Sometimes, late at night, when he was alone in his apartment, he would scroll through his old messages and see Ao's name. Memories would flood his mind. The river, the mango trees, the dusty football games, the sound of Ao's calm laughter. For a moment, his chest would tighten with something that felt like longing. But then his phone would ring and another voice would call him out to a party or a meeting, and the feeling would fade again. Back in the village, Ao's parents grew weaker with age. He worked harder to care for them, often skipping meals so they could eat first. But even when he was tired, he still smiled whenever he thought of Kwame. "My brother is doing well," he would tell anyone who asked. "He's in the city now making big moves." He didn't know that Kwame had started feeling empty despite all his success. The city that had once seemed so bright now felt cold. People smiled at him, but their eyes were sharp. He had money, but he had no peace. Sometimes, when he passed by children laughing on the street, he would stop and remember how he and Ao used to laugh without worry. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled outside, Kwame sat alone by his window, watching the drops slide down the glass. He thought about Ao. It had been almost a year since they last spoke. The guilt in his chest grew heavier. He picked up his phone and typed a message. "Ao, my brother, I've missed you. How are you?" But before he could send it, his phone buzzed. A work message, another deadline, another distraction. He sighed and deleted the text. "I'll message him tomorrow," he said quietly. Tomorrow never came. Weeks later, Ao sent another message, a simple one just to check in. There was no reply. He smiled sadly but didn't give up. "He's busy," he said softly. "The city is big. But he'll remember me one day." And though he didn't know it, Ao's patience, his gentle faith, and his unshaken care for his friend would one day become the very reason Kwame's life would be saved. For now, the two friends lived in separate worlds, one full of noise, the other full of silence. But between them, an invisible thread still connected their hearts, a bond stretched by distance but not broken. And that bond, though quiet and unseen, was still alive, waiting for the day when it would be tested in a way neither of them could ever imagine. That night, the sky above the small town was heavy with clouds. The sound of crickets echoed outside Ao's window as he slept lightly beside his parents' room. But in the middle of the night, something strange happened. Ao began to dream, and it felt so real, so vivid, that he could almost hear the sound of engines and screaming voices. In the dream he saw a long, wide road stretching endlessly through green hills. A big white bus was moving fast along the road, filled with people talking and laughing. Through the glass window, Ao saw his friend Kwame sitting near the middle, wearing a neat shirt and holding his phone. Kwame was smiling, looking outside as if thinking about something pleasant. Then suddenly the road ahead turned dark. A sharp bend appeared and the driver shouted something. Ao's heart pounded as he saw the bus lose control, sliding across the road. He screamed in his dream, "Kwame, get out." But before he could move, the bus hit something with a loud crash. There was smoke, fire, and cries of pain. Then everything went silent. Ao woke up with a start, his body covered in sweat. His heart was beating so fast he could barely breathe. The dream had felt too real. He sat up, staring into the darkness of his small room. The air was still, but he could feel something heavy pressing against his chest. Fear. He rubbed his face trying to calm down, but the image of the crash kept flashing in his mind. It was like his spirit had seen something it wasn't meant to see. He didn't waste a moment. He reached for his old phone and switched it on. The screen's light filled the room. Without thinking twice, he typed a message. "Brother, please don't travel tomorrow. I can't explain why, but I have a bad feeling." He stared at the words for a few seconds before pressing send. Then he sat on the edge of his bed, whispering a prayer for his friend's safety. He didn't know if Kwame would listen, but he hoped he would. Far away in Accra, Kwame was lying in his comfortable apartment, scrolling through his phone. His bag was already packed beside the bed, shirts neatly folded, shoes polished, everything ready for his business trip the next morning. He was traveling to Kumasi to meet a new client. It was supposed to be a simple trip. When his phone buzzed, he saw Ao's name and smiled faintly. It had been a few weeks since they last spoke. He opened the message and read it slowly. "Brother, please don't travel tomorrow. I can't explain why, but I have a bad feeling." Kwame laughed softly and shook his head. "Ah, Ao and his strange dreams," he said, smiling to himself. He placed the phone beside him and turned on his side. Still, something about the message stayed in his mind. He turned off the light and closed his eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept going back to that message, the words, the tone, the urgency. He could almost hear Ao's calm voice saying them. At midnight he sat up, restless. He picked up his phone again and read the message one more time. "Don't travel tomorrow." He exhaled deeply and whispered, "It's just a dream, nothing more." But as he tried to sleep again, he felt a strange unease in his chest. His heart beat faster than usual. He turned and turned in bed, but peace refused to come. Meanwhile in the village Ao sat awake too. The rain had begun to fall outside, soft at first, then heavier. The roof drummed with sound but he didn't care. He kept whispering prayers, asking God to protect his friend. His mother woke and saw the light from his room. "Ao, why are you still awake?" she asked softly. "I just had a bad dream, Mama," he said. "About Kwame." She came closer, her old eyes full of concern. "Dreams are sometimes warnings, my son. You did well to tell him." "I hope he listens," Ao whispered. Back in Accra the night stretched long. By morning the sun rose brightly over the city, painting the streets gold. Kwame woke up tired but determined. "Dreams are dreams," he told himself. "I can't cancel work because of that." He got dressed in a crisp shirt and packed his things. As he locked his door and walked to the bus station, he felt a strange wind brush against his skin. He paused for a moment, remembering the message again. But he shook his head and smiled. "Ao worries too much," he said quietly. At the station the buses were already filling with people. Vendors shouted, selling snacks and drinks. The smell of roasted plantain and dust filled the air. Kwame bought his ticket and found a seat near the window. He leaned back watching people outside and tried to relax. Then just before the bus started his phone buzzed again. It was Ao calling. He smiled and answered, "My brother, good morning." Ao's voice sounded tense. "Kwame, please promise me you won't go." Kwame laughed lightly. "You and your dreams. Don't worry, I'll be fine. It's just a short trip." "Please," Ao said again, his voice softer now, almost breaking. "Something doesn't feel right. I can't explain it. Just listen to me, stay home today." Kwame looked out of the window. The driver was already checking the seats. "Ao, it's too late," he said. "The bus is leaving now. I'll call you when I reach Kumasi." "Kwame." But before Ao could finish, the line went dead. The bus had started moving. For a long time after the call ended, Ao sat silently on his bed, staring at his phone. The sound of the rain had stopped, but his heart still beat hard. He tried to tell himself that maybe it was nothing, maybe the dream meant something else. But deep down, a voice kept whispering that something was wrong. On the road, Kwame looked out of the window as the city faded behind him. The bus moved through green hills, just like the ones in Ao's dream. The sun was bright and people were talking and laughing. Everything seemed normal. But then halfway through the journey, clouds gathered. The driver frowned as the sky darkened suddenly. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavy. The road grew slippery. Kwame's phone buzzed again. It was Ao calling once more. He looked at it, sighed and smiled. "He'll never give up," he muttered. He was about to pick up when the bus suddenly jerked sharply to one side. People screamed. The driver shouted, trying to control the wheel. Kwame's heart leaped. The bus swerved, tires screeching on the wet road. He dropped his phone as it slid across the floor. Then there was a loud bang and everything went black. Back in the village at that exact moment, Ao felt his chest tighten. His hand froze and his phone fell from his grip. He looked around the room, breathless, as a wave of sadness filled his heart. He didn't know what had happened, but deep inside he knew something was terribly wrong. He knelt down and prayed, tears falling down his face. "Please God, protect him. Please." And though he didn't know it yet, that simple prayer, spoken from a heart full of love and faith, would become the reason something miraculous would happen the next morning. The friendship that had once faded with time was now bound again by something greater. A warning, a dream, and a heartbeat that refused to let go. The morning sun rose slowly over Accra, painting the sky with soft gold. The air felt cooler than usual, and a gentle breeze passed through Kwame's open window. He turned in bed, still half asleep, before remembering the strange unease from the night before. Ao's message echoed in his mind like a quiet voice that refused to fade. "Brother, please don't travel tomorrow." For a few minutes he lay there, staring at the ceiling. He could have already been on the road by now, halfway to Kumasi. His bag was packed, his ticket in his pocket. But something, maybe the weight of his friend's words, maybe the restless feeling in his chest, had made him change his mind just before dawn. He told himself he'd rest a bit longer and travel later in the afternoon instead. He got up slowly, stretched, and walked to the small table where his phone rested. The screen lit up as he picked it up. There were several missed calls and notifications, but one caught his eye, a breaking news alert. He tapped on it absent-mindedly, not expecting much. But the moment he read the headline, his heart nearly stopped. Terrible accident on the Accra-Kumasi highway. Several injured, many feared dead. Kwame froze. His breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened as he read the details again, slowly, as if hoping he was mistaken. The report said a bus traveling from Accra to Kumasi early that morning had crashed after skidding off the wet road. The exact same time he was supposed to be on that bus. His hands began to shake. The phone slipped from his grip and hit the floor with a dull sound. His legs suddenly felt weak and he sat down heavily on the edge of his bed, staring into space. The world seemed to spin around him. That could have been his bus. Those could have been his last moments. He pressed his palms together, trembling. "Oh God," he whispered, his voice breaking. "That could have been me." His heart pounded loudly in his chest. The room felt too quiet, too heavy. Then, without thinking, he reached for his phone and dialed Ayo's number. His fingers were shaking so much that he almost pressed the wrong buttons. The call rang once, twice, 3 times. No answer. "Ayo, please pick up," he muttered desperately, pacing the room now. He could feel his heart pounding in his ears. He called again. Still no answer. He grabbed his keys and almost rushed to the door before stopping himself. "He's fine," he told himself. "He must be fine." On the 4th try, the call finally connected. "Brother?" Ayo's calm, tired voice came through the line. Kwame could barely speak. His voice came out shaky, almost a whisper. "Ayo, you saved me." There was silence for a few seconds. Ayo could hear the weight in his friend's tone, the fear, the shock, the gratitude all mixed together. "What do you mean?" Ayo asked softly. Kwame took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "The bus, the one I was supposed to take this morning, crashed." Ayo. "It's all over the news. If I hadn't delayed my trip, I would have been there." There was a pause. Ayo closed his eyes, his heart sinking. He sat on his wooden chair, staring at the old radio beside him. He had felt something strange in his chest that morning, a pull in his spirit, as if something had been weighing on Kwame's life. Now he knew why. "Brother," Kwame continued, his voice cracking, "you saved my life. You did. If you hadn't sent that message, I would have been on that road." Ayo sighed softly on the other end. His tone was calm but full of emotion. "I just did what any brother would do," he said. But Kwame shook his head even though Ayo couldn't see him. "No, Ayo, it's more than that. You listened to something I didn't. You believed when I didn't. You saved me." There was a long silence between them, one that carried more meaning than words ever could. The sound of distant birds came through Ayo's window. Kwame could hear it over the line, that familiar village sound he had long forgotten. Finally, Ayo spoke again, his voice steady but warm. "Do you see now, Kwame? Sometimes friendship isn't just about talking or laughing. It's about feeling something deeper. When your spirit speaks to me, I listen." Kwame wiped his eyes, his throat tight. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "I've been a terrible friend. I forgot who always stood by me." Ayo chuckled softly. "You're my brother, Kwame. You don't have to say that. We all lose our way sometimes. What matters is that you're still here." Kwame leaned back in his chair, tears burning in his eyes. His heart felt heavy, but for the first time in a long while he also felt peace. He realized how close he had come to losing everything, his family, his dreams, his life, all because he hadn't listened. The two friends stayed on the phone for a long time without saying much. Sometimes silence spoke more loudly than words. Later that afternoon, Kwame turned on the television. The news showed the bus wreckage, twisted metal, broken glass, and rescue workers carrying people away. His stomach tightened as he recognized the same logo painted on the bus door. He turned off the TV quickly, unable to watch. The thought of how close he had come to being one of those names haunted him. He sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. Then he whispered, "Thank you, Ayo. Thank you, God." That evening he couldn't stay in his apartment. He packed a small bag and took a taxi straight to the village. The road felt endless and the air grew cooler as he got closer. He kept thinking about how one message, one simple act of care, had changed everything. When he arrived, Ayo was sitting outside, fixing a small lantern. He looked up in surprise when he saw Kwame step out of the taxi. "Kwame?" he said, standing quickly. Kwame didn't speak. He just walked over and hugged him tightly. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. Ayo smiled slightly, patting his back. "Ah, now you're going to make me cry," he said quietly. Kwame pulled back, his eyes glistening. "I came to see you. To thank you. You truly saved me, brother." Ayo shook his head. "No, my friend. I only followed what my heart told me. The rest was in God's hands." They both sat down on the small wooden bench outside the house. The evening sun painted the sky orange, and the sound of children playing filled the air. Kwame took a deep breath. "I forgot how peaceful it is here," he said softly. "I forgot how real life feels when you have people who care." Ayo smiled. That's the thing, Kwame. The city moves fast. But friendship, real friendship, stays even when everything else changes. The two men sat quietly watching the sky turn from orange to purple. There were no big speeches, no promises, just two hearts bound again by the strength of something simple and pure, care. As darkness fell, Kwame looked up at the stars and whispered, "You saved my life, Ao." Ao smiled, his eyes soft. "Maybe you would have done the same for me." They both laughed quietly, and in that moment they knew nothing, not time, not distance, not even silence, could ever break what they shared again. That night, Kwame slept soundly for the first time in many months. And when he woke the next morning to the sound of birds, he sent Ao a message of his own. A week later, the morning sun shone brightly over the quiet village. The air smelled of rain and earth. Kwame stepped off the bus with his small bag in hand. His heart beat fast as he looked around. The place felt both familiar and new at the same time. Children ran past him laughing, women were selling fruit near the roadside, and the sound of a distant drum echoed softly through the air. For a moment he simply stood there, breathing it all in. This was home, the place he had once left behind in search of something bigger. He began walking down the dusty path that led to Ao's house. Each step brought back memories. He remembered when they were boys running along the same road barefoot, chasing after kites made of old paper. He remembered Ao's laughter, deep, honest, full of joy. He also remembered how he had slowly drifted away from that friend, lost in the noise of the city. Now all those memories filled him with both warmth and guilt. When he reached the old wooden gate, he saw Ao sitting outside under a mango tree. Ao was cleaning a small radio, humming quietly to himself. The same peaceful look was on his face, the same calm that had always set him apart from everyone else. For a moment, Kwame didn't move. He just watched him, his heart heavy with emotion. Then, unable to hold it in, he called out softly, "Ao." Ao turned quickly, eyes wide with surprise. Then a smile spread across his face. "Kwame?" Before Ao could say anything more, Kwame ran forward and wrapped his arms around his friend. It was not just a greeting, it was a hug full of gratitude, apology, and love. His eyes filled with tears as he whispered, "You saved my life." Ao chuckled softly, patting his back. "Ah, my brother, I only sent a message," he said. "The rest was up to you." But Kwame shook his head, stepping back slightly. "No, it was more than that. You listened to something I ignored. You cared when I had forgotten what friendship meant." His voice trembled, but he didn't care. He needed to say it. Ao smiled, that calm, gentle smile that always made things feel better. "That's what true friendship means," he said quietly. "Even when we are far apart, our hearts stay close." For a long moment they both stood there under the mango tree, not saying anything. The leaves moved gently in the breeze, and a ripe mango dropped onto the ground beside them, rolling to a stop. They laughed softly at the sound, and just like that, the heaviness between them began to fade. Ao brought Kwame inside the house. It was small but warm, filled with the smell of burning wood and the sound of a kettle whistling. Ao poured him a cup of tea, and they sat on the old wooden bench they had built together years ago. They talked for hours, about life, the city, and everything that had happened. Ao listened quietly as Kwame shared his fears and guilt. He didn't judge or interrupt, he simply nodded as he always had. At one point, Kwame looked at him and said softly, "I almost forgot how to be a friend. The city changes people. You start thinking money and success are everything. But when I saw that news about the accident, I realized none of that matters. Not if you lose the people who truly care about you." Ao smiled faintly. "You found your way back," he said. "That's what matters." As the day turned to evening, the sky turned golden. The two friends stepped outside again, watching the sunset together. The field stretched wide, glowing under the soft light. For a while neither spoke. There was peace in the silence, the kind only true friendship could bring. Later that evening, Kwame decided to stay the night. He helped Ao fetch water from the well, something he hadn't done in years. They laughed when Kwame slipped and nearly dropped the bucket, splashing water all over himself. "You've become soft, city man," Ao teased, laughing loudly. That laughter filled the air, warm and familiar. It felt like old times again, simple and full of life. When night came, the two sat by the small fire outside. The stars shone brightly above them, clearer than any city sky could ever show. The sound of crickets echoed softly. Ao poked the fire with a stick, and the flames flickered gently. Kwame looked up at the stars and said, "You know, Ao, I think God used you to save me. Maybe he wanted to remind me of what really matters." Ao smiled, not taking his eyes off the fire. "Maybe," he said. "But I think he wanted to remind both of us that friendship is a gift, one we shouldn't forget. Kwame nodded slowly. You're right. I won't forget again. That night, Kwame slept peacefully in the small guest room. He hadn't slept that well in months. When he woke up early the next morning, he felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his heart. He found Ao already awake, preparing breakfast, roasted plantain and tea. As they ate, Kwame said, I'm going to visit more often. No, not visit, come home. You and this place are part of who I am. Ao laughed. Then I'll make sure there's always tea ready. They both smiled, and for the first time in a long while, Kwame felt truly happy. When it was time to leave, he hugged Ao again. Thank you, he said, his voice soft. Not just for saving my life, but for reminding me what it means to live. Ao nodded, patting his back. Go and live well, my brother. And never forget, real friendship doesn't fade. It just waits for us to find it again. Kwame smiled, his eyes shining with emotion. He turned and began walking down the same dusty path that had brought him there. The morning sun was rising again, golden and bright, as if the world itself was giving him a new beginning. When he reached the main road, he stopped and looked back. Ao was still standing at the gate, waving. Kwame waved back, his heart full. As the bus drove away, Kwame leaned against the window, watching the trees pass by. He took out his phone and sent a message to Ao. Brother, thank you. You saved my life and reminded me of my heart. Ao read the message and smiled quietly to himself. He looked up at the sky and whispered, Thank you, God, for keeping him safe. From that day on, Kwame never took his friend for granted again. Every week he called Ao. They talked about work, life, and sometimes about nothing at all. But the sound of each other's voices was enough. Kwame had learned something important. Real friends are rare, and sometimes their love can even save your life. And every time he remembered that terrible day, he smiled and whispered softly, Ao, my brother, you saved me in more ways than one. The end.